Hello and welcome to Capitalize on the Growing Demand for Asset-Based Managed Services, sponsored by ReadyWorks. My name's Ed Hannon, and I'm joined today by Paul Dior, co-founder of ReadyWorks, and Andrew Sweeney, co-founder of ReadyWorks. And I'm going to get started, guys, right with the first question. And Andrew, this one's for you. Can you define what the term asset-based services means?
Sure, Ed. So asset-based services, it's just a kind of a fancy way of saying combining a piece of software or platform with professional services to solve a very niche problem, typically for an enterprise customer. So for instance, one large consultancy, they've got a thing called shared investigator as a service, so that they provide to pharmaceuticals to automate clinical trials. Deloitte has pricing analytics as a service. It's a combination of their pricing engine with some consultancy to help airlines set ticket prices. And then Ernst & Young has something similar called like a legal managed service, where they have a platform that they tie together with some professional services, and then they use it to service particular problems for the legal industry. So the key traits are really take a platform, combine it with a little bit of services, sell it in a subscription type model, and go after a niche problem.
When you talk about companies like Deloitte and Ernst & Young, those are some big name companies, and it clearly speaks to the concept that I'm going to ask you about in this next question. What is it that makes asset-based managed services so popular?
Yeah, it's a good question. So maybe I'll start from a customer perspective, right? So customers absolutely love it, and that's really what's driving the popularity. It's a lower upfront cost, so you're typically have a pre-built solution that they can plug into a problem and then just configure it a little bit for themselves. It's quicker time to value, so rather than having to build something or a long consulting engagement, asset-based services is a solution that can be up and running typically in a couple of weeks after you get approval. There's no operating headaches for the customer, so they don't have to train people and onboard them and manage them and kind of own a whole set of infrastructure and software for a problem. They're going to outsource that to you. And then it's really a lower risk model. So typically the pricing in an asset-based managed service is usage-based, number of tickets closed or, number of users using the system or something like that. So clients like it because they've become accustomed to that as a service subscription model that they can scale kind of up and down, whatever makes sense. For the providers, people that are probably watching this webinar, it's great. I mean, we've seen it completely transform consulting business. First and foremost, it's the holy grail. It's long-term recurring revenue, which every consulting firm loves, right? It's not like you're going to go sell a project and then you have to sell the next one. Once you do this, it goes on for a long time. The second is typically once you've put in an asset-based service, you tend to never leave because you've automated the business process. To give you, for instance, Gartner did a survey of CIOs, I think it was Fortune 1000 CIOs, and 95% of respondents said that if they had an automated solution that was running a business process, they wouldn't replace it. They would see no sense in replacing it unless it was just terribly not working. So it ends up putting a great moat around your services. And then the last is it builds fantastic differentiation. So if there's two consulting firms bidding for a project and one is kind of a time and materials bid and the other consultancy is coming forward with a platform and a pre-built service, the platform, the asset-based service is going to win every time.
So all that said, we talk about who's using it and why it's so hot right now. Even though it's hot right now, there are analysts out there that predict it's going to grow over the next 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
How is that possible and why are they predicting that?
No, it's a good question. And it is definitely one of the hottest markets out there for technology providers. Throw some numbers at it. I like the statistics. If you take a look at 2020, something like, based on Gartner, 78% of consulting engagements were pure labor plays. So time and materials or some type of subscription pricing that was basically, built on top of labor. And the forecast is that by 2024, that'll be cut in half. And that over 50% of IT services across the industry will be asset-based managed services. And I think what really, Ed, would be interesting for people listening to this webinar is that this is a greenfield opportunity. There was a survey that went out by one of the big market analyst people, and it was 70% of respondents said they'd be really interested in replacing time and material consulting services with an asset-based service, and 25% said that they would at least considering it. But of that same group of people, 60% of them said they've never had a provider come forward with this type of model. So you're really in a situation where if you're a consultancy that has a set of skills around something, it is likely that there is not someone competing with you in this space, and you can really really capture a niche right now and really build your business. The reason why it's growing, kind of getting back to the question, it's what we said earlier. It's the customers that are driving it. They're starting to expect it. It's low upfront cost. It's their ability to scale, the speed of implementation. They don't need to hire people, and they love the as-a-service subscription pricing.
Just to sort of put a cap on this section,
Sure.
what are some key distinguishing features of asset-based managed services?
Yeah, it comes back to what we started out with. It's taking the services that you've traditionally delivered and enhancing that with a software platform. So automating large swaths of what you would typically do with a platform, the manual stuff, the scheduling, email communications, all the logistics of your project, all of that can be automated. And then the second characteristic is it's a service. So you sell it as a service into a customer to get long-term revenue and to make a very low barrier to entry for the customer to kind of get their feet wet, or whatever the saying is.
Excellent. Now, I promised we didn't have Paul just on here just to have a third face.
Yeah,
We're actually going to ask we're actually ask some questions of Paul, and we're going to give Andrew a little break here. So, Paul, I want to bring you in. What does it take to be successful when you offer asset-based managed services?
Well, Ed, there's really two primary ingredients when you think about these offerings. First being, you have to be crystal clear around what your offering solves and what are the specific problems that you're addressing. Every customer vertical we engage with or that you have within your portfolio, they're slightly nuanced, and there are different things that drive what's important. So if you're dealing with a financial services customer versus a healthcare client, HIPAA regulations versus SOX compliance are two different sets of mandates. And you as a provider really need to understand what those requirements are and ultimately how that shapes your offering. And so when you're thinking about what you're offering, you've got to be crystal clear around what you're doing and how that benefits the end customer. Really, what is the problem you're solving, and what are those outcomes that you're going to deliver as a result of that service? And as Andrew mentioned a moment ago, these are largely greenfield kind of spaces. So your ability to find a niche and build something that highlights your abilities to specifically address them is kind of the essential first ingredient. Afterwards, it's really got to be efficient, and in every sort of way, right? Ease of implementation, time to value, and faster ROI, right? If your offering takes years to implement or to build in that regard, it's really going to hamper your benefit and your ability to get traction. So it's something that's going to be lightweight, something that gets stood up very, very quickly, and ultimately something that you own from end to end. You really want to try to avoid the political challenges of replacing, incumbent investments or other systems. And if your solution is dependent upon the involvement of, a steering committee and 5 other teams and a bunch of other stakeholders, it's really going to hinder your ability to get traction. So clarity and efficiency are really the primary ingredients.
Now, what happens, Paul, if you don't follow this trend?
You're just going to miss a tremendous opportunity to grow the business, right? Post-COVID, we saw that like 70% of companies are just accelerating their investments in digital transformations. And really what that means is there's just a sustained and accelerated investment in IT transformations and investments. And so everyone's trying to go digital. And for service providers that are listening to this, they should be looking at that as really kind of a rising tide and a kind of a boom opportunity. But beyond capturing kind of that immediate opportunity, it's also an opportunity, like Andrew said, that notion of kind of the holy grail of sustainable or predictable revenue. That's something that they can kind of do in the initial outset, but then have it as a predictable part of their practice. Secondly, besides the opportunity that might come with this kind of this landscape, if you don't really kind of shift and position yourself in this approach, you're going to end up losing market share. The writing's on the wall. There are large providers and large vendors that are already going down this path and are building these types of approaches. But if you don't, you're going to struggle to remain competitive or even differentiate your offerings. And even if you've got the most loyal customers in the world that you've engaged with for years, you're going to lose that wallet share to new kind of bespoke offerings that are going to come from new providers. So it's really not a question of you can't afford not to, essentially.
Now, that being said, we've talked about all this. I want to sort of bring this back around to the to the audience here. And so, how does a provider, someone who's watching today's program, how do they get started with asset-based services?
It's really start with what you know and think about the clients, the verticals they're in, their specific needs, where there are areas of pain, today that are really ripe for improvement. I'm sure you've kind of engaged with folks or clients or efforts where you're saying there's got to be a better way to do this. That's kind of like the first signal, and kind of start with that space. But then position into the idea of the asset and the tooling that's going to help you get there. I wouldn't recommend kind of building a widget and trying to spend years in that production process. Our recommendation is to align with a tool or platform that can extend your offering, pretty much out of the box. For example, ReadyWorks is a platform. We come with pre-built templates and offerings around several different kind of use cases, from data center migrations and cloud migrations to Windows servicing and IoT deployments. These types of bundles allow providers to really just kind of hit the ground running, as opposed to kind of that organic ramp up approach.
Now, with something like this that you're not introducing, but maybe it's a growth opportunity for people.
Mm-hmm.
There have to be landmines. There have to be traps that people tend to fall into. What would you identify as some common problems that providers can immediately target and resolve for most of their customers with this approach?
There's a couple of places that are obvious candidates to kind of jump from. So find things that are maybe compliance driven or mandated, or even things that are an end of life event, something that a customer has to do that we are essentially saying, here's a problem, here's that landmine, and here's a kind of a pre-bundled way to address that without kind of having to invent something out of the blue. And again, I would also look at just kind of the market trends and what's happening in the context of digital transformation. It's really just a massive opportunity in our entire industry. So when we think about things from an infrastructure perspective, like I mentioned before, data center migrations, IoT deployments, remote workforces, Windows as a service, virtualization. I mean, these are all just top of mind on everyone's radar. Really kind of align with any of those opportunities and then kind of build from there.
And this last one, I'm going to start with you, Andrew. I'm going to bring you back in on this one. How does ReadyWorks meet all these challenges and also help MSPs?
So ReadyWorks has really been built with the IT service provider in mind. So the platform is very, very flexible. And what we could do is work with a provider, and it's a very straightforward process. And we could take what they're doing from a consultancy perspective and teach them how to do it on the platform. And again, it attacks things that are in a typical IT program that are costly and repetitive manual labor. That's what you can take out. So scheduling thousands of end users for something to happen, coordinating with communication plans out to people, orchestrating 3 or 4 different systems, or pulling in data from 10 different places. That's typically done on spreadsheets. The platform is really designed to do that. And so someone that's listening to the webinar that has a consulting practice and they have something that they deliver, that's the magic of what makes them special. But what we can help do is really automate all of that stuff around their practice. That's going to let them drive down the cost and sell it as a ongoing subscription-based service.
Paul, you want to jump in on that one too?
Sure. And maybe for folks that are kind of thinking about this for the first time, what we're able to help out with is we've done this 1,000 times before. So if there are scenarios or opportunities where you're not really sure about how to build a practice around this, we can facilitate the conversation to say, this is what the platform does. These are the types of scenarios we've been able to support and augment and help kind of brainstorm around those offerings to come up with something in a joint effort.
I'll add to that. I'll just say, if it's something that you think you want to do, we could get you started very quickly. So our interest is in getting our platform out there, helping IT service providers to build out an asset-based practice. And we can definitely help you get running either with pre-built, to Paul's earlier point, hot projects that are out there now that you could just go and sell to a customer base, or take what it is that you've been doing and really have it automated on the platform in a couple of weeks.
While we have a couple of minutes, guys, just one quick question for both of you. What's the first thing that people who've watched and enjoyed today's program should do when they leave this program?
I'd recommend if folks that are just kind of considering the notion of an asset-based service and maybe are kind of new to the territory, I would say take a look at the ReadyWorks site and look at some of the use cases and the examples of how we've applied this type of approach to different industries, to different verticals, to different kind of use cases. I think that'll help kind of frame out the idea and potentially the scenarios that might work for other service providers. And additionally, I would also suggest take a look on kind of a Google search and take a look at the ideas around asset-based services and look at what some of the larger providers are doing, like the EYs and the Deloittes of the world, and you can kind of see how they're going to market and how they're bringing these offerings to bear. And granted, that competitive landscape will be a little bit different for folks maybe in this audience, but it'll start to kind of show this is essentially the market trend. This is where customers are expecting their providers to come to the table with these types of capabilities and offerings, and I think it'll give some good context around what might be the appropriate next step.
Yeah. And then I'll add to that, Ed, if you've done the research and you think this is something that you might want to do and you're serious about it, we are actively looking for service providers that are interested in doing it. I think there's an offer that'll come up after the end of the webinar, but we are offering up to $10,000 in marketing development funds to kind of co-market an offering. So if you're interested in it and if you're serious about it, please get in touch with us because we'd love to partner with you and work together to get it out there.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. You heard right from Paul and Andrew. You know what to do now. Get in touch with them and follow up because it's a great opportunity that awaits you. So I would like to thank my guests today, Paul Dior and Andrew Sweeney from ReadyWorks. And I'd like to thank all of you for watching as well. And once again, you've been watching Capitalize on the Growing Demand for Asset-Based Managed Services. My name's Ed Hannon. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.